Hi, everyone. So today we're going to go over some other FAM notes. So first is to keep in mind that conditional distributions during any frequency or severity calculations, they could be conditional. So for example, this is typically the case when you're doing these credibility questions or where you're having a discrete distribution of the claim count, but then that mean itself follows a continuous distribution. So one of the common examples of this is the claim count follows a Poisson, but that lambda, the mean, follows a gamma. So that unconditional distribution is negative binomial. So you want to be very conscious and aware of these conditional distributions that could appear on the note that it's not just a Poisson, but it's actually a negative binomial if you do the unconditional distribution. So you want to take very good note of that. Second is variance of a sample. If you're given a sample is n over n minus one of the typical variance that you would calculate. And the n minus one is to account for the fact that it is a sample. It's not representative of a population. So that's one thing to keep in note. Three is being comfortable with doing as many calcs as you can and not getting the answer, but then still moving on and maximizing their score. So there's going to be many instances where you do a lot of calculations, you go through all of the steps, but then you still don't get the answer. You have to be mentally okay with that and then still move on to the next question. And then another tip is that a lot of these distributions that you'll see, continuous distributions, specifically actually Pareto and Gamma, you want to make sure you know what the expected value and the variance of these ones are. Because in the formula sheet, what they will give you is they'll give you e to the x to the k, right? Expected value of the kth moment, right? Or the kth moment. And you don't want to go through all of that just to calculate the variance, get the expected value, and plug all that in. So you want to make sure for these common distributions, so for Pareto and Gamma specifically, you know what the expected value and the variance are. Whenever you're finding MLE, and probably going to be a question on MLE and MLE calculations. When you're finding MLE and when you're doing the likelihood function and to get the product, you want to remove the constants, right? Removing the constants will just make the entire expression a lot more simple. So, for example, if you're finding the MLE of this expression right over here, you can remove the 10, you can remove the 350 to the 6, right? 25 to the 5. These are just constants. And when you take the natural log and then the derivative of the constant, it's zero. It has no effect on the maximization. You want to make sure when you're doing the MLE, when you do the likelihood function and you take the product, you remove the constants because that's ultimately going to make the expression more simple. Variance of an annuity. Variance of an annuity is not the second moment of the annuity minus the expected value of that annuity squared, right? That's one of the common uh, tricks that they can throw at you. It is the second moment of the insurance minus the expected value of that insurance squared over d squared or over the force of interest squared. Whenever you have chain ladder problems or BF problems, you want to make sure that you draw out the loss. You want to make sure you draw out the triangle of the claim payments, and then you want to make sure that the development year one is the x-axis, right? The y-axis is going to be the accident year. Whenever you see UDD, you have to almost assume that you will use something with it, right? You will use something with it. So in the case of finding the mth monthly annuity, it's the Woolhouse form. It's the UDD equation, right? It's the UDD equation, and the UDD and Woolhouse will give very similar answers, but you want to make sure you're using the UDD equation with the alpha m and beta m. Again, one of the other things is you want to know the simple word version for the Woolhouse formula when it is a term, right? Term annuity. So if it's AXN with payments monthly, right? You want to make sure that's AXN minus M over 2M minus 1 times 1 minus NEX, or that endowment, right? You don't want to go through all the entire calculation of calculating AX and then doing A minus AX plus N and then discounting that back. You want to make sure you know this formula. Just probably might be a question on that. So you want to make sure you know that simplified version of it. And then you also make sure that whenever you have annuity insurance connection relationship is super important on this exam. So whenever you have really any type of annuity where it's either monthly or whether it's a term, want to connect that to insurance. One of the symbol topics I want to go over is that AX N over, and then the one is over the N, that represents endowment or NEX, right? And then AXN, where that one is over the X, that represents term. So these are very similar symbols. That's very easy to mix up. We want to make sure we don't do that. And you remember that if it's above, if the one is above the N, it's endowment. If the one is above the X, it's term. The goal is to get through as many passes of the questions as quickly as possible. Not goal is not to get every single question right. Goal is to get through as many passes of the question so you can maximize your score and do the ones that you know how to do correctly. Mu x plus t, force of mortality is also a critical concept on the exam. If it is UDD, you can think of the force of mortality at age x plus t, where t is less than 0. It's qx over 1 minus tqx. This is also another important formula that could be tested. I've seen this on SOA problems and SOA exam questions and SOA sample exam questions. Sometimes plug in the answer choices if it might save you time. So when you're going through, when you're trying to calculate MLE and you have like a theta to the ninth, try to just plug in the answer choices, see which one gets you closest to 0 and select that one and move on instead of try to do the quadratic formula and to do all of that to save time. Time is your main opponent here, if you know the material, obviously, is time and managing what questions you want to do. Normalize the amount of calcs that you're doing. So there will be many calcs that you're doing on some of the questions. Some of the questions might require a lot of different steps. Mentally, you want to be prepared for that and just expect that you're going to be doing a lot of these different calculations. Try to store as much of the variables in your calculator as possible. So this is why you want to use the store function feature in your calculator. If you have like a long decimal, you can store that as X or Y, and then you can use X, Y, or A, right? There's like 7, I believe, you can store and you can use those when you're doing the calculations. A, it saves time. B, it also reduces human error if you don't have certain parentheses in the right order. So just storing those variables will help you enhance speed and accuracy. Remember the small details. So remember the small details, especially when you are calculating, for example, the second moment of a continuous whole life insurance. That is not I over force of interest times the second moment of a discrete whole life insurance, but it is actually I squared plus 2I over 2 times force of interest. So you want to make sure you're just very caveat, you know these small little details for the exam. Another symbol thing is 1,000 PXN refers to the net premium for 1,000 insurance, right? You don't divide by 1,000, and that PXN is not actually the premium. It's the 1,000 PXN that is actually the net premium. Okay, so that's one of the things you want to make sure, because the PXN refers to the insurance, right? Endowment insurance, a whole life, or uh, over the annuity, over the annuity. So you want to make sure that this refers to this. You want to make sure you know that. And then if you times that by 1,000 or whatever the insurance amount is, that gives you the net premium for that insurance. So this is referring to the amount. This is referring to the ratio of the insurance and the annuity. And so the entire expression, the 1,000 PN, refers to the net premium for the 1,000 insurance. So that's one of the things you want to keep in mind. Another one you want to keep in mind is just that there will be pilot questions. There will be questions that are worded very weird or very weirdly worded questions that you may not expect to be on the exam. What you want to do is you want to maximize your score, do the questions that you know how to do correctly and efficiently and fast. And then even if you do get to a point where you do have to take a guess, you always want to guess one answer choice for each of the questions. You're probably going to maximize the ones that you will get correct if you just pick one answer for all the questions instead of just randomly guessing. And try to eliminate as many of the answer choices as you can. So that's it. Some of these FAM tips. See you in the next video.